Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving into an absolutely explosive domino effect. We're looking at how a tiny, seemingly harmless little spark in a bakery morphed into one of the most devastating urban disasters in human history, the Great Fire of London. We're going to break down the exact mechanics of this catastrophe. Specifically, why didn't that one spark on Pudding Lane just quietly burn out? Why did it end up consuming a massive European metropolis instead?
To really get a grip on this, you gotta step back in time with me for a second. It's 1666. London is this booming, incredibly busy hub, one of the largest in Europe, but it is definitely not the city of brick and steel and glass that we know today. Picture yourself standing in these incredibly crowded streets, surrounded almost entirely by wooden houses, and they're packed so tightly together. It's late. The whole city is asleep, and literally no one has any idea that in mere seconds, a disaster is going to be unleashed that will permanently change history. Okay, so let's get right into it with Section 1, the Midnight Spark.
Our story officially kicks off just after midnight on September 2nd, 1666, on a little street called Pudding Lane. Down this street, there's a bakery run by a guy named Thomas Farnier. Sometime in the night, a small, completely ordinary spark manages to escape from his bakery oven. Now, honestly, at first glance, this seems like your everyday, normal fire. It's the kind of minor accident you'd totally expect in a busy 17th century bakery. But as we know, it absolutely wasn't.
Which brings us to the core question of our whole explainer. In Section 2, fueling the flames. Why didn't this totally mundane spark just fizzle out on the floor?
To figure out why it spread so wildly, we have to look at the exact environmental and architectural setup of the city. It was, quite literally, a perfect storm. Remember how I said London was super busy and crowded? Well, that meant the streets were incredibly narrow. We're talking houses practically touching each other across the alleyways. On top of that, the vast majority of these homes were built entirely out of wood. And the real kicker? The fatal ingredient here was the wind. There were these strong, relentless winds blowing across the city that night. So the second that spark escaped Farriner's oven, the wind just caught it, whipping those flames from one highly flammable wooden house right to the next, straight across those narrow gaps.
Within just hours, this minor bakery hiccup was completely out of control. This leads us to Section 3, a desperate, losing battle.
Let's just track these agonizing 4 days of pure destruction. It kicks off with that midnight spark on September 2nd. Then, as we roll into September 3rd, 4th, and 5th, the fire just rages. I mean, it is showing zero mercy. Families are frantically rushing into the streets, grabbing literally whatever they can carry: blankets, clothes, a little bit of food, while so many others are just running for their lives with absolutely nothing. The chaos must have been unbelievable. You've got horses pulling carts loaded with whatever furniture people could save, and massive crowds flooding toward the River Thames, just cramming into boats to escape the burning city. The fire is chewing through markets, businesses, homes, even St. Paul's Cathedral, one of the greatest architectural landmarks in London, goes down. The destruction is on such a massive scale that the glowing sky can be seen from miles and miles away. People honestly thought the entire city was just going to disappear. Finally, though, on September 6th, the winds actually begin to weaken.
But right, you're probably wondering, what exactly were the firefighters doing during all this? Well, this is 17th century firefighting we're talking about here. There are no helicopters dropping water. There are absolutely no modern fire engines pumping high-pressure foam. Nope. Their main strategies? Forming human bucket lines to pass water from the river and literally tearing down buildings by hand. They'd use hooks and ropes to try and create these gaps, or fire breaks, hoping the fire wouldn't be able to jump across. But as we just established, those winds were just insanely strong. Hand-pulling buildings and tossing little buckets of water was just completely failing against an inferno of this size.
So put yourself in their shoes for a second. The winds are absolutely howling. The heat is unbearable. St. Paul's Cathedral has just collapsed. Your bucket lines are completely useless, and tearing down wooden frames by hand is way, way too slow. How do you actually stop a massive city-consuming fire when you have literally zero modern technology at your disposal?
Well, the crucial point here is that it took a seriously extreme intervention from the very top. King Charles II personally steps in, and he orders a radical solution: gunpowder. Yep, since pulling houses down by hand wasn't cutting it, he orders soldiers and workers to literally blow up entire rows of houses right in the fire's path. It sounds crazy, but this incredibly violent, destructive action finally did the trick. It created fire breaks that were actually large enough to stop the flames from advancing, right as those relentless winds finally died down on September 6th.
So, With the flames finally under control, the smoke slowly begins to clear, and it reveals a completely, fundamentally altered city. Let's move into Section 4, Rebuilding from the Ashes. Just let this number sink in for a second. 13,000. Over 13,000 individual houses were completely destroyed. Just gone, turned into nothing but ash and rubble.
Around 87 churches were completely wiped off the map by the flames. And that's alongside countless local shops and businesses.
And the human toll? It's staggering. Nearly 80,000 people were left entirely homeless. 80,000. Now, official records from back then claim only a few people actually died. But come on, historians today are pretty much in agreement that the true number was likely much, much higher. It's just that so many victims of an inferno that intense were never identified.
But, the Great Fire actually became a harsh but incredibly effective teacher. Think about pre-fire London. Highly flammable wooden houses, super tightly packed, narrow streets. It was literally a disaster waiting for a spark. But post-fire London, as they rebuilt, the city put strict new building rules into place. Houses had to be built from brick and stone now, not wood. They actively widened the streets so a fire couldn't just easily jump across. And really importantly, this whole push for better urban planning eventually led to the creation of organized, dedicated fire brigades. So out of this terrible, terrible tragedy, you get the birth of stronger buildings and far, far better fire protection.
In fact, today, if you visit London, you can actually go see the Monument to the Great Fire. It stands proudly right near Pudding Lane, right near where that very first tiny spark escaped Thomas Farner's oven. It's this powerful physical reminder. It shows visitors the breathtaking scale of the destruction for sure, but it also highlights the remarkable courage, unity, and just pure determination of the people who rebuilt their beloved city from a literal pile of ashes.
The Great Fire of London really proves that even the absolute worst disasters can inspire vital systemic change. But, it also leaves us with a pretty critical question to ponder. As we look at the safety of our modern cities, safety protocols that were literally forged in the ashes of 1666, what hidden vulnerabilities might still exist in our urban spaces today? What is our modern equivalent of a wooden city, just waiting for a spark? Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer. Keep asking those big questions, and I'll see you next time.